Hi, I'm Guy Mackenzie and I'm in the St Leger Live Lounge in Penzance, and we're just about to do another McMullen production, and I have with me somebody who I admire very much as a drummer, and it's Baz St Leger. Very nice to meet you, Baz. Firstly, Baz, tell me how it all started for you. How did you become a drummer, and what sort of age were you when you started playing the drums?
Well, I started in music when I was 6, and that was largely because my mother was a child prodigy, offered a major touring contract and recording contract at 8, which she wasn't allowed to take up because we're back in the 1930s there, and it wasn't a done thing. But at 6 she wanted me to start learning. She thought that was the right age, and I started on piano, keyboards, and then eventually changed to drums at 12, largely because they thought that was the best thing for me.
Okay, and so your first gig was at the age of sort of 12 or 13, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And then you were playing live with bands from a very early age, from 14 or 15, is that correct?
I was playing with bands live, being paid very well from the age of just 13.
That's incredible. And then there was a band called the Chantels, which was a band you were involved with for some years, and they also had some very well-known musicians, didn't they?
Yes, the Chantels advertised for a drummer, and by this stage I was living in a shed in the garden because of practicing all the time, and parents weren't going to stop me, so the shed was built.
Yeah.
I answered the advert. They all trooped into my shed, which was a bed, a drum kit and a piano and a record player, and said, play something. I played something, and they said, you're in, we're playing tonight, tomorrow night, the night after, the night after that. And the person I replaced was Graham Edge on drums.
Of the Moody Blues,
Of the Moody Blues. And the most famous other person in the band was Chris Ace Kefford, who ended up being the first singer on Radio 1 with The Move. And he joined Jeff Beck for a while. He was on the only Jimi Hendrix tour of the UK, as far as I know.
Good Lord. And then, of course, you were touring Europe at quite an early age too, weren't you? Sort of perhaps the age of 15 or...
15 years of age, I went into Europe touring, playing the clubs. I think probably slightly illegal, but the road manager acted as a chaperone. I think that's how I got away with it.
Okay. That's pretty good, but I think back, I would not have been touring at 15. But then, of course, there was a big club in Birmingham called Mothers, is that correct?
Yes, Mothers was, the venue had been a club, music club, 7 nights a week for some time, but it was bought by a big syndicate of music managers, agents, and turned into Mothers. And it was just full-on top bands, 7 nights a week. You had to be paid-up member, and there was nearly 40,000 paid-up members, and it wasn't cheap. The 2 DJs in there, one was John Peel, and the other one was Whispering Bill Harris, I think his name was, 2 of the most well-known.
Bob Harris.
They DJed, Bob Harris, yeah, and they DJed there. The Pink Floyd recorded the Montgomery album there. I think the first live performance of Tommy by the Who was there. When it closed, the closing gig was Elton John.
And then, of course, there was a story about Screaming Lord Sutch when he played there. Something happened to a piano, if I remember rightly.
Well, it was unusual in that there was a lot of damage when we went in to play the gig that night, and the piano was wrecked and literally in bits. All the hammers pulled out. And I did ask what had happened. They said, "Oh, it was Screaming Lord Sutch in last night, and that's what he does to pianos."
And then, of course, the Chantels sort of progressed into a band known as The Way of Life, and The Way of Life had some very famous members as well, apart from yourself, of course, Baz.
Yes, the Way of Life was an evolvement. It was pretty well the same band, and the band did change its name through a few different names, but it ended up being The Way of Life. I left about that time because I'd been offered a really great jazz gig, the best in the Midlands, with 2 outstanding musicians being paid very well. and so I thought that was a good move for me. And the guy who auditioned to join The Way of Life was John Bonham, and I went back to see the guys one night to see how it was going. I didn't know that John had joined them. I didn't even know who John was. And I'd grown a beard, and it was very dark because everything was painted matte black in with us. And I stood next to the two of the key members who I'd known for 2 or 3 years at least, and they didn't recognise me because I'd grown a beard, as a Jones. But the only person who did recognise me was a voice right in the corner, and that said, "Oh, it's Baz," and that was John Bonham. And I did say, "Hey, do you recognise me?" If the other guys didn't, because I don't really know you. But and he said, "Because I've had my head under your drums for a long, long time."
That's quite an accolade, you know, and it's quite something to be able to say that John Bonham made a comment like that about you.
Yeah, I mean, he was 2 years younger than me.
Sure.
And so he was still struggling with gigs, etc., etc. And that band pretty well had it nailed in the Midlands, gig-wise, been offered 30 gigs a week. And John was struggling, and so it was probably, I think, the first biggest step in his development was joining The Way of Life.
And of course, one of the reasons he admired you is because you'd started off as a jazz drummer, but you're a jazz drummer playing rock.
That's right, yeah, absolutely.
But then later in that, you had a family, if I remember rightly, and you stopped touring abroad, and you became what you described as a hired gun.
Yes.
And you played behind some pretty big names then too, didn't you?
Yeah, cross paths. I wouldn't remember them all. I probably wouldn't even know them all because it's just you're doing a professional job. You go and play a gig, and I certainly wouldn't ever ask to have my photograph taken with somebody. Right. You do the job, you get paid, and you go home, and you certainly don't create any hassle or whatever. But I not actually playing a gig with Stevie, but I know Stevie Wonder was brought on stage one night to got the numbers. As a hired gun, I've been hired in to play with people like Lonnie Donegan, the Crystals, the Herd, and a few others as well.
And of course Eden Kane, who Lars and I met only a few weeks ago.
I remember that going back. I would struggle with them to know. I think it was somewhere in Worcestershire. Also, I was very lucky to actually. I didn't play with the Crickets, but I was lucky enough just to play during the sound check. In Nuneaton with them, so most of them I've forgotten, to be honest.
Okay, and then of course you had you had one of the first people to use a very remarkable Ludwig drum kit, weren't you? Tell me about that.
Yes, well, I think what I was playing prior to that was I'm pretty sure it was a Slingerland, and I wanted something a little bit. I wanted a change, and I went to what I think was certainly one of the biggest drum shops in the UK. I had to travel a fair distance, and I was there before they opened. Opened door went in, and I turned around. It was a sunny day, and there was this massive kit in the window with the sun shining through it, and it was a Vista light, which is see-through, except it was the I think it was called Tequila or Malibu Sunrise, and it's in bands of scarlet, and then amber, and then yellow, and it was 8 toms. 2 bass drums, 2 floor toms, and with the light shining through it
looked very
phenomenal to look at, and it did sound great. It was a phenomenal sounding kit, and people used to take pictures of it before we even started playing.
I'm sure they did. Yeah. But then there was another very spectacular performance you had at the Conservative Club at Dudley Conservative Club, was that right?
Yeah, Dudley Road Conservative Club. Yeah.
When you were doing a drum solo, you sometimes did something else at the same time. What was that?
I did, yeah. We were always trying to find things more spectacular and more entertaining because you got paid well and you got the gigs. And I had started to introduce fire eating. But the thing that was very unusual about it was the only thing that I found worked for me and achieved the explosive effect that I wanted and the range of about 20-foot flame was 5-star high-octane petrol. And originally it used to be bought on a tray by a roadie in shot glasses, and I would take it and then ignite it and it would explode. But it got so well known, there were a number of national newspapers there, and I was just using a bottle of petrol in one hand. And I overdid it. I did it too much, took too much petrol in my mouth, did 2 or 3 blasts, took another mouthful of petrol, brought the torch round, and I didn't know I'd been dribbling down my front, so my front was soaked with petrol, and I literally exploded. And because the petrol bottle was in my hand, that went off like a flamethrower. I spun. It set all the walls on fire as I went round. I caught the audience were screaming, including the men, and running. I set fire to their backs as they were running, and I was fortunate, and I know it was the lead guitarist grabbed me quick with something, carpet or whatever, and rolled me and put me out. And that saved me. Otherwise, I'd probably been a mess.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today.
I doubt if I would. Even if I'd have hiccuped, I wouldn't be here today.
But the other thing was, of course, it resulted in legislation to stop that ever happening again on stage.
Yes, I was summoned.
And you were discussed in Parliament, I think.
It was. I was summoned to the Chief Constable's office, and he read the Riot Act.
Yeah.
He said, "You've been issued with a life ban. Here's the letter from the Home Office stopping you from ever doing it again, either in the UK or any of its associated countries." But questions have been raised in Parliament about what you've done, because there was no control of it. That's why nobody ever stopped me.
Yeah.
And in fact, the clubs loved it, but it wasn't very dangerous. So he said they're going to pass legislation to make sure nobody ever repeats what you've done.
And then gradually, coming into the 90s now, you moved to Cornwall, didn't you? And in fact, but you also set up some businesses, and you also act as a consultant to a certain music store run by somebody quite well known. Yeah,
I did end up with a number of companies. One of them was a consultancy, and one of the things I did was consultancy for Argent's organisation, which has still got a very big store, one of the biggest in London, dealing in high-tech stuff, but it was the out of London stores, and I doubled their profit level for them.
That's pretty spectacular, if I may say so. But you were still gigging, Baz, and of course what you didn't know until today is that you and I have actually both played for the same blues band at different times, of course, because we're both drummers. Well, different standard of drummers. But I did in 2013 and you did 2015, and that was the Parchment Blues Band, and we both did the Lou Festival with them.
Yes, wasn't it great? It was lovely. It's just like fabulous festival. It's just a lovely atmosphere. Really liked it, very laid back.
It was. A fabulous. And now, of course, you're helping Vicky. You're doing some spectacular shows, and Vicky, of course, is a very well-known teacher, and you put on spectacular shows. But also, in 2017, you've been, I would have said, honoured by being invited to something in the States. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there's a massive. I think it's the biggest in the world, and it's in Los Angeles. It's every year. They film it. They have what you can only describe as legendary figures from the world of rock who play Led Zeppelin music. So it's a tribute to Led Zeppelin, but in particular to John, because John
Bonham
passed away a long time ago, whereas none of us have, thank God. And so it's named after John as the Bonzo Bash.
Right.
Which is better than jam, I guess.
Yes.
And they contacted me and said, if you ever want to come, we'd love to put you on the guest list. And I said, yeah, that's lovely. And then they contacted me again, actually. It was only a few hours later, and said, actually, if you would be willing to come and be a guest speaker, it's something that the crowd really like, because that connection with John Bonham is rare, and to actually have somebody that they can see the connection with somebody they idolise, and would you come and speak? And so I've agreed to go over this year.
Fantastic. Baz, I'd like to say thank you very much for talking to me. I'm still slightly amazed that you're still with us, with that story about the petrol, but thank you very much for your time.
You're
and
welcome.
I wish you the best, and have a great time at the Bonzo Bash.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.